Today is June 24th, 2008. My name is Sue Paul. We are at the Warhawk Air Museum, Nampa, Idaho, and I am conducting a Veterans History Project interview in conjunction with the Library of Congress. Today I will be interviewing Mr. Owen Agenbroad. Welcome to the Warhawk Air Museum, sir.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Could you please, also in the room present is our wonderful camera operator, Don Bittler. Sir, could you please give us your full name?
My full name is Owen Darst Agenbroad.
And your full address?
1515 South 4th Street, Dayton, Washington, 99328.
Could you tell us where you were born and the year in which you were born?
I was born in Nampa, Idaho, on my uncle's farm on June the 30th, 1923.
And sir, could you tell us which division of the military you were in and which war that you served in?
I was in Fox Company 27th Marine 5th Marine Division in World War II on Iwo Jima.
Thank you, sir. Owen, you were born in 1923 in Nampa, Idaho. The early years of the Depression, wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you grow up in Nampa?
Yes. Graduated from high school here.
My gosh.
Went to a year and a half of college at Northwest Nazarene College, which is Northwest Nazarene University now.
And what did your father do for a living?
Farmed.
He farmed?
And in the early years he drove a canvas-covered school bus to haul the country kids into high school.
He also worked in the early days in the 1900 in Blackfoot, Idaho.
Right.
This is a picture that shows
He and his
a
dad
wagon train.
were hauling freight out of Blackfoot, Idaho to various parts.
In 1900. So he moved to Nampa, Idaho. You were born. Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, all of us were born at home ranch or my uncle's place.
And how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I got I got 3 brothers and 3 sisters. One brother died at childbirth.
Tell us about growing up in Nampa. What was it like during the Depression years here?
Well, as a kid, it was fun. We had all we needed to eat because Mom always had a big garden. She would can beef for the winter. We didn't have refrigeration like we have today. She'd can beef and pork. We had all the chicken we wanted to eat during the summer because she'd bring chickens in, keep the pullets to lay eggs together in the winter to trade for groceries. The roosters we all ate at various functions, 4th of July.
I'm going to show a few pictures while you're talking. This is your early years growing up in Nampa.
That was in probably when I was in the first part of my high school year. I was out weeding onions on the home place. It's my mother and Stan, and I'm pushing the wheel hoe.
How much land did you all have?
I had 80 acres total, but only about 49 of it was tillable.
And
The
this
rest
is
of
your
it was
home?
sagebrush. That's the old home place where I grew up, and part of it was originally was his homestead, part of his homestead house.
And this is a picture of you next to an old model what? What is this car?
29 Chevy.
A 29 Chevy with your sister.
It's on
This is you.
Thanksgiving Day.
Thanksgiving Day.
I don't remember it was about when I was in the 5th grade though, because I remember that overcoat very well. That's the first time I got a fleece-lined overcoat.
Through high school, what were your interests?
I had a lot of interest, but it didn't pan out because by living 7 miles out of town, we didn't have access. I wanted to play football, but I played as a sophomore here because I could get out in time to catch the bus home. So then I converted to track and ran the track. And I was in the drama department, band for 2 years, and I sang in the a cappella choir for 2 years.
You're pretty busy.
It was fun.
Yeah. You were 18 years old when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And where were you that day?
I was at home getting dinner for the rest of the family who was at church, and I had the radio on and I heard they attacked. Told them when they got home.
Did you know what that meant?
Oh
The
yeah,
significance
I
of
knew
that?
I knew it was in for a war, but I didn't know for when and how long. And it was during that time that I went to school at NNC, and I got out of there. Then I became deferred for farm labor, 2C category, until they got to the point where they needed more bodies. So in January of '44, I got a summons to come to the draft board. And my birthday's on the 30th of June, and that was the last day of that period. She said, "Why didn't you tell your mom to wait a little while, and we wouldn't have to go quite so quick?"
Not that you had a choice in that.
I said I didn't have much choice. So
How'd you get in the Marines? Was that
when I
a
went up-
choice, or were you drafted?
Well, it was a choice. When I went up for my physical, I told the sergeant in charge I wanted to get in the Marine Corps, and he said, "I don't know whether we can do it or not because our quota's full," but he called the captain over and says, "This guy wants to get in the Marine Corps." He said, "When you come up to finish up the physical, you let me know." And I got in. There was three of us at the same time left Nampa. Rusty Shazer from Payette and Frank Florian from Nampa. We got on the train and rode the coach to Salt Lake City, and there a military Marine MP and a sailor SP came through and wanted to know if anybody here going to San Diego. Well, we being greenhorns, we held up our hands and said, "Would you like to ride on a Pullman?" Sure, who didn't? So we got on the Pullman train. The minute we got in, they shut the door. He said, "You're on a military train now. You can't get off till we get to San Diego." So we was with a bunch of Army guys. Went to San Diego. When they let us all at San Diego, we climbed aboard buses for the Marine Corps base, and got there. The sergeant who met us there, he said, "When you fall out here and put your feet on the footprints that are on the blacktop." And he said, once you got there, he said, "Now you can quit your thinking. From now on, the Marine Corps will do it for you." And from there, we went into the base, and like Stan was talking about, casual company. We was in casual company while I was waiting to form a platoon, get enough people to make a platoon. And we hauled the surplus things from the horse barns around San Diego to put on the sand that they dredged out of the bay to make the lawn for the Marine Corps base there. And the sergeant in charge says, "When we're back here loading up them carts, do anything you want to. I don't care if we don't do but one cart a day, but when you're out in front of that building, work like maniacs." He says, "They'll be watching you." Then we formed a platoon, and 8 weeks of boot camp.
Was that tough?
I didn't mind it. Some of the guys did, but I'd been in the band and I knew what marching was about, and coming off the farm I was well conditioned. We spent 5 weeks marching and drilling and 3 weeks on the rifle range, just snap and drive firing. We didn't actually do any firing till what they called the day when you fired for credit. You know, I fired as a sharpshooter and paid me $3 a month more. So
Wow.
the $75, I got $78 a month.
Had you used a rifle on the farm a
Oh,
lot?
yes.
So you were a marksman
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
The only reason I didn't make expert was you couldn't argue with the man on the firing line, and he gave me the wrong windage at the 500-yard lines until the last 2 or 3 shots. He realized he'd given me the wrong windage, and I knew he was, but I didn't dare turn around and tell him. He finally got me back into the bullseye, but it was too late then. And so
Where was Stan in this? And you had more than one brother?
I had the older brother was in the submarine corps.
He was already in the submarine. Oh, that's
Right.
right, the submarine corps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Stan didn't come into the latter part of the war.
Okay.
He was 3 years behind me in high school, and
You were the oldest brother. You had
No.
one older, and then you, and then Stan, and then you had another brother,
then Larry.
Larry, who was in the Seabees.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was you. So you were the next one in the service. Then your older brother was.
Yeah.
Already
I was
in.
the second one in
Okay.
the service.
Okay.
I'd always wanted to be a Marine ever since I was big enough to know who they were.
Why?
They just looked good in their blue uniforms,
Mm-hmm.
but I never got one.
Mm.
I just wanted to be a
Wanted to
Marine.
be a Marine, so here you were, and so you spent 8 weeks in San Diego in basic
Right.
training. I'm just going to show a few pictures while we're talking here. In basic training, did you make some? Did these? Where'd you go after
Well,
that? Did you remain?
After I got through in the platoon, we was out learning how to use the bayonets, and the corporal come out there and he called for me and he said, "I see by your resume that you played the bugle in high school in the band. I said, yeah. I said, well, you just got conscripted to the bugle school, field music school. I said, I don't want to go there. He said, well, you go there anyway. Not you'll be assigned, you'll have lost whatever rank, or it'll go in your record book. You wouldn't go to field music school. So besides that, they dangled a carrot out in front of me of 10-day furlough. So most of the rest of the guys in the platoon, they just went on out to line camp, didn't get any furloughs. 10 days? Sure, I'll take it. So did, come back, went about 3 weeks of steady blowing on the bugle. And when I graduated from there, I went to headquarters and service company of the 27th Marine out of Camp Pendleton. Then from there we went to Hawaii after August we left, and about latter part of June or first part of July when I transferred out to Camp Pendleton. In August we went to Hilo, Hawaii on the Big Island at Camp Kamawela. It was at the town of Kamawela. Camp Tarawa was the camp name. The 2nd Division had been in there named Camp Tarawa, and we moved into tents, lived in tents the rest of the time.
Did you know where you were going to be going to fight at this point?
Nope. We did a lot of training. Looking back on it now, I can see the training that we did was getting us ready for what we actually did when we hit the island. And we left there in January of '45. It was between Pearl Harbor and Iwo where we stopped to get more supplies, that they told us our destination, and they said Iwo Jima. Iwo Jima, where's that? And why are we going there? Don't make any difference, we're going there. That's the island. It's 8 square miles, a little speck out in the Pacific Ocean, and it's also Japanese mainland property. And from Iwo we went to Saipan. They told us before we transferred from off of the APAs to the LSTs, we'd have a turkey dinner with everything. Well, the last minute they said, no, we'll save that for the guys coming off the LSTs, and you get your turkey dinner on the LSTs. We didn't get a turkey dinner.
Really?
Then we boarded the LSTs and rode them on into Iwo Jima, and they woke us up on D-Day at about 4 o'clock to start us through the breakfast chow line. We got all the steak and eggs we wanted. You could have just as many steaks and eggs as you wanted, and then about 8 o'clock they told us to fall down to the deck where the Amtraks were, get in your Amtraks, and we were each assigned to a specific track. And then they shoved us off into the ocean. Fortunately, there was not too heavy a sea, because if the seas had been heavy and one of them had been swamped, they'd just gone straight down. But we got out there and we're like a bunch of decoy ducks floating around. We circled around for maybe an hour or so before they got the line of departures situated, and we lined up. There's 5 assault battalions, 5 assault waves. The first wave was armored amphibs. They went in and with 75 millimeter cannons to subdue the beach, and then the troops followed in order of. I was in the 4th, actually the 5th wave if you count the Amtrak, the armored Amtraks as the first wave. I was in the 5th wave. HR was at 9 o'clock, and at 9:17 I was on the beach. On the sand there, if you want to see what it was like on the sand, if you've ever seen a pile of wheat piled up during the harvest outside, put 40 or 50 pounds on your back and try to climb it. We'd sink up to our knees in the sand, but we finally got up on top, and our orders go straight across and turn to your right, make a 90 degree to the right and head that way. The 28th Marines, which we talked about a little bit, they went the other way. At the foot of Suribachi, they started up the battle for Suribachi. We were at the south end of the airstrip number 1, which about the time they raised the flag on Suribachi, the first B-20, crippled B-29 came in. I saw it come in and land. We wondered why we took Iwo. It was to take the airfields and eliminate the Japanese fighter planes and give a haven for the crippled B-29s coming in.
Is that when you realized that, when you saw the crippled B-29 coming in?
Well, we knew it before that. They told us aboard ship why we were taking the island.
Why don't we have you go over to the map and show us where you landed and you know where you're talking about on the island.
This is Red Beach #1, where I landed. The reason I know that's where we were is because Futatsu Rock was right there, and I saw it as we went by it. We landed here, up to here, and crossed the island to here. Our first objective was to secure the airfield, and we went up here, and that's when the B-29 come in, crippled one. From there, we just kept going on slowly but surely on up through here, generally speaking, and ended up here. I never did get to see that part of the ocean. The 26th Marines in the 4th Division did that. 26th were part of the 5th Division.
And where was the flag planted?
Up on top of Suribachi here.
Okay.
There's a kind of a funny incident about that. 4 or 5 days after they planted the flag, there was a Japanese corpsman came in and surrendered. He said, "I've been there for 8 years and I've only been to the other end of the island once. And we packed all our armor and ammunition on our backs up that mountain. You people come in 2 weeks, in 2 or 3 days you had a 2-lane highway up there." He says, "No use fighting you," so I quit.
Wasn't that unusual though?
Yeah.
I mean, the
Yeah.
Japanese just did not
They
surrender.
didn't surrender, no.
Were they firing on you from the time you landed?
Yeah.
Were you under fire?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And went bypassed pillboxes that come back into life. They thought the airstrikes and the naval bombardment there wouldn't be anything there. But we found out that the pillboxes were they were concrete 4 to 5 feet deep, thick, under about 6 foot of sand, and the big old shells would land and just make a thud, and all they'd do is Japanese would shake their head like that and come back out and go to firing.
And I understand that it was hard to even see the enemy because they were in their tunnels and that
They
you
were
didn't know about.
They were well camouflaged. General Kobayashi told them they were to take 10 Marines before they died themselves. He knew that they'd never come out, any of them would come out of alive. He said, "You take 10 Marines with you before you get killed." So, and they were well camouflaged. I can't describe it without you seeing it. The island was made up of sand and kind of a clay-like rock. They had 12, 13 miles of underground passageways that they would go from here to here, or over there. They just had, and they had a full hospital 3 stories down.
Whereabouts on the island was the hospital, do you think?
It was up in this general area. I don't know, I never saw it myself, but I just know it was there. And Kobayashi's headquarters was underneath. But they had a tunnel from here to Suribachi. And the guys could hear them jabbering and underneath them, but they didn't know how to get to them.
Did they try to destroy the airstrip? Were they constantly trying to stop the airstrip from being used?
No, the Japanese were just trying to get rid of us so that then they'd go back.
Okay.
But the first one came in, and I found out later there was 1,200 B-29s that used this. 10 men per plane. You know how many airmen this island saved? But it cost us 6,000 Marines to take this.
Oh my God.
And they talked about Iraq and 4,000 in 5 years.
You said over 6,000 Marines
Were killed
on this island.
And
in a
I think more than 20,000 casualties. Many of them came back, were wounded and came back again. And there were 20,000 Japanese. We heard there were 22,000 Japanese on the island. And I heard after the war that only 1,100 of them surrendered, and that was after we'd left the island. They were starving for food and water both, and they came in and surrendered.
What was the hardest part about fighting on Iwo? Besides the terrain itself, but the fact that the enemy was undercover, you couldn't find them.
I should have prefaced this as my assignment on the island was to carry messages from division headquarters to the front lines. I was not actually one of the front line people, shall we call them, I was on the front line because there wasn't a definite front line. Everywhere you were at was a front line. But my job was to carry handwritten messages in code if the telephone lines went out and they didn't want to do it by radio because they were afraid they broke the code, and so I had to carry coded messages. They were on rice paper. And if I was to come under, I wasn't to seek out a battle fight, but if I come under attack, I was try to eat that message and keep it so they couldn't get it. And
Did you ever have to do that?
no, fortunately no. But I never traveled the same road twice because the Japanese, they have a habit of doing the same thing over and over the same way. So I played enough cowboy and Indians as a kid, I knew to keep away from them. So I'd take a different route, even coming back. One time, 10 days after we'd been on the island, they pulled us back to the foot of Suribachi for a little rest and reorganizing. And we got ready to leave. We was walking up in this group of Army people off to my left. I looked over there just to look at him, and there was a kid from Nampa who was a year ahead of him in high school. I hollered at him, and he come over and walked with me for maybe a quarter of a mile. And one night we was moving up. We didn't get to where we were going to set up our new command post. The island is called Sulphur Island, and there were sulfur beds, and they were hot. We had ended up at dark on them sulfur beds, and the only way we could make a foxhole was to dig up about an inch or 2 inch slab of that, put it around where we were going to be. Then that was our foxhole. I considered myself a revolving rotisserie, a human rotisserie. I'd roast on one side and freeze on the other and roll over the other way until I got so cold or so hot I couldn't, and I had to do it. Just I slept, but not much.
Did the Japanese come out at night?
Not particularly. They did a couple of times, but we caught them before they did anything. We were hoping for their banzai attacks like they'd had in all the other islands. They didn't do that till the very last one. They were down on there's no food and no water. And Kuribayashi, they say, led the charge, but the Marine engineers, they went through the Air Force area, and Marine engineers and others stopped them. And I forget, there's several hundred Japanese killed there. Now, you ask if I had actual combat, yes and no. I probably was responsible for the death of more Japanese than anybody else in the platoon because I carried messages of what they were to do and how they were to do it. So they did it, but I brought the message of how they were to do it. I should have prefaced this. I'm not a hero. The heroes are still on Iwo, or were when before they brought them home. And you won't talk to any of them.
Yeah. You said you had a couple of humorous stories about your experience.
Yeah. The funny one of the fellows had false teeth. And he asked his buddy, could I borrow your canteen cup? Well, he thought he wanted a cup of coffee or something. He said, sure. Well, then the other guy woke up the next morning, there's this guy's false teeth in his cup.
And he didn't drink coffee out of that cup that morning, I bet.
I don't know whether he did. Yeah, we probably did because it didn't bother us that much. They flew DDT over us to kill the flies, and we had big cans of juice, and we just punch a hole in it so we could drink it. And one of the guys was getting ready to pour it into his canteen cup, and a big old blowfly come out. He just threw it over his shoulder, poured him some more, and went on drinking. But it was so common that they were so common. He just went ahead.
So other than as far as the island itself as an area to fight on, what other, was it difficult? Was it a difficult island to be on, or?
Yeah.
Because that's what I've read.
The Japanese didn't really have a good water source. They would distill the sulfur fumes coming out of the sulfur beds for water. We were allotted only 2 canteens of water a day, which is a pint, about a quart of water a day. That's all we were allowed to have, and they were distilling seawater to get that. We've envied the communications people because they had wire in the sulfur beds. They'd take their sea rations and put a wire around it, drop it down one of them fumaroles. Of course, they vented it first, but they'd had hot chow. The rest of us was eating cold. First when we landed on the beach, we had 2 days supply of K rations. And I don't know whether you know what K rations are. And then when the Army come in, they brought C rations in. We thought we was really eating high on the hog, getting the C ration. And later they brought in what they called 10-in-1 rations, which had bacon and butter in them. Then we did. And one of the funny instances, if you want to look at it, I was back at the division headquarters, and the guys were cooking up 10-in-1 rations, and the colonel said, "The guys up front got them yet?" "We don't know." "Well, you're not going to eat them till they get them." So he made them quit firing, cooking it, and took it away from them and sent it up to the guys on the front. And that was really good.
The flag raising, were you at all aware of how that was going to be publicized?
No.
No.
I just delivered a message to the first sergeant, and I borrowed his binoculars, and I just wanted to kind of look around, see what was going on. I just happened to look up and saw the flag just after it had been raised. I told him, and he passed the word to the troops, and you didn't hear so much cheering at any football or basketball game you've ever been to. It was quiet compared to the noise that went up from that. While there also, I was looking the other direction, and I saw a cave where they brought an artillery piece out, fired a few rounds, and pushed it back into the cliff. And I told him about it. He showed him where it was, and he got on the radio and called the artillery and told them, and helped them bring in. And about 3 or 5 minutes later, there was no more artillery there.
But you all had discovered early on that artillery really wasn't very effective on the island itself, because the Japanese were burrowed down so deep that it didn't. So it was hand-to-hand combat that you had to do.
After we got there, the artillery we used it on people. Then it was effective, but to knock out pillboxes and so forth, virtually worthless. You get 6 feet of sand on top of 4 feet of concrete. And
we've heard stories, and actually a film that was made, Flags of Our Father, which is a fabulous book, about some of the atrocities as far as some of the Marines disappearing down into some of these holes. Did you ever have any experience or know of any of that?
I never saw any of them that were done. I'd heard about them, that different ones had been hauled in. I probably heard about your wife's uncle Iggy, but I didn't know him, so it didn't really ring a bell with. Probably the most gruesome sight that I experienced was got caught in a mortar barrage, and I jumped into a shell hole, and I hadn't any more than got landed, and looked across the shell hole, and there was a backbone of somebody, just 3 or 4 inches of his ribs sticking out from his backbone. I don't know whether Japanese or us.
I'm going to move over next to you, and we're going to look at some of these pictures of Iwo, because they depict quite honestly your experience there and what it looked like.
Okay.
Oh, and the planes that came in and landed on that strip while you were there, was it mostly B-29s that had been damaged?
Yes, B-29s only. Our planes were off of aircraft carriers.
Okay.
And like I was telling you before, the Corsair, which is what the Marine Corps had, we loved to see them come in. They had inverted gull wings, and they'd fly right on the ground practically. The Navy was all right, so was the Army, but those were the better. We had about the middle of the campaign, they had the Black Widow come in. It was a twin-tailed night flyer. We were glad to see them because they carried bigger loads than the P-38s and the Corsairs and the others. And it was a real plane.
What would be done with the B-29s that came in? What would happen to those men? They'd repair them and then fly out?
They repaired them and flew them off again.
Yeah.
The first one that come in, he wasn't on the ground less than a half a day, and they had him repaired. And back there, he went back to Saipan.
And of course, the value of Iwo was that it was so close to the Japanese coastline.
It allowed, once we got it secured, it allowed our fighter planes to escort the B-29s over Japan during their bombing raids. Before that, they had no fighter escort, and the fighters would come up off Iwo and harass them, and we stopped that by taking the airfield that they were using.
And before we captured Iwo and had this airstrip, the damaged airplanes just had to go in the ocean.
That's right.
They had no
choice
to go.
but to go to the ocean. That's why I said earlier, we saved 12,000 airmen from a watery death by taking the island.
Well, let's look at these pictures, and I'm going to show them to you, and then we'll put them up to show on the film. This picture right here, and I'll turn it around.
That's the troops on the amphib tractors. The one below it is an amphibian tractor, and this was the inside of it. We were down in there behind the gunwales. When it landed on the beach, the front end, some of them went down on the front end, some in the back, and it jumped out and onto the beach, up the beach.
Were there very many drownings trying to get to the beach? Because I know that was pretty perilous if the seas were rough.
I don't know of any of our assault troops that went down. We had some fellas that got submerged on a rock, and the coxswain thought he was where they could get off, and he lowered the ramp and told them to jump off, but he was wrong. They went down.
These men in the top picture have white on their face.
That's what they had on their face for in case you were close to an explosion that you wouldn't get flash burn. It was a protective layer.
A special powder of some sort.
And it was kind of a paste.
Okay. And this picture now.
That's the shot that's very close to where the 28th landed, and the 27th was right beside it. It's hard to distinguish where it was. If it showed the rock, I could tell you a little better, but it's the beach. And we had to climb up them sandy terraces to get on top.
This is where you're saying you were sinking to your knees.
Yes.
With all the packs that you had on, the weight you were carrying. And these pictures are, these are injured men.
Yeah, that's
a
a
makeshift
typical
hospital.
evacuation area
Here.
on the beach. Those are the guys I felt sorry for. They couldn't do anything for themselves. They just had to lay there, and if the artillery come in, there's nothing they can do. They were laying there, they couldn't get up and move. There's lots of casualties in those evacuation areas.
And the casualties were caused mainly by hand-to-hand combat, or the artillery firing?
Both, mortars, artillery, rifle fire, landmines.
Was that going on all the time?
Yes.
This is an advance.
That's just a typical of an advance up
You can do all of these.
the west beach.
Uh-huh.
We went abreast up the beach. There's another funny incident that I was going to tell you about. Once when they kind of got the line secured, they told a couple of guys to go out and clear landmines out in front. So they went out there and they was having fun. They was kicking up their heels, finding landmines, and finally went by some guy and said, "You guys, what are you doing out here?" And he told him, he said, "You know where you're at?" "Yeah, we're just a little way in front of the lines." He said, "You're about 60 yards in front of the front lines. You better be heading for home." So they quit looking for landmines. That was two guys from my platoon.
That was something else then. You had landmines all over.
Yeah.
That had been planted.
In fact, one night when I was carrying a message up, three of the guys, I run into them and they asked me where such and such company was, and I said, "I can't show you, but I can't tell you, but I can show you if you'll just wait here for a minute or two." And then I walked through a stockpile of landmines. Didn't know it. They hollered at me, and of course, with the helmet over your ears, you didn't hear them. I found out about it later. So somebody was looking for me from upstairs.
These are the beaches. This
Yeah, that's
in the bottom picture is
just a scene of the beach after we got in and evacuation, and it shows the destroyed equipment there.
What was the weather like?
We only had nasty weather once. It rained 2 or 3 days, and it was cold, but the weather otherwise, you sleep in your dungarees.
So it wasn't miserably hot.
No, it wasn't miserably hot nor miserably cold.
This is Tracers over Iwo. Could you tell us about this?
Well, there's two stories about that. One of them was that the communication boys had trouble with one of their walkie-talkies, and they were repairing it, but they thought they were on a different channel, and so they said to the other to see if it was working. Said the war in Europe was over, and that broke loose. Now, I've never seen them wilder. display of fireworks than I did that particular night.
That was
The official story that came out was the Japanese were over, and they were firing at the Japanese plane.
That's nice that you've cleared that up.
That's as close as I came to being wounded on the island. A piece of that shrapnel fell down and hit my rifle, which was laying on top of my...
Where are you? Okay. This is hard to see, but this is a Protestant church service. This is typically what it would look like. And you are right up in here somewhere. I can't quite see, but up in this area. But tell us about the church services. They were held every Sunday?
No.
No?
I think that's the only one we had on the island, as I recall. If there was more, I didn't know about them. We had them aboard ship if it was on a Sunday, but no, that's the only one that I know of.
Why don't we see if he can point it out?
Okay. Why don't you... Let's put this here and see if you can point out you.
Gotta get where I can see it. Right there. That's where that was where I at. And the one above, if it's on the picture, is the Catholic services.
Right there. And this is Catholic. Okay. You were on Iwo Jima for 36 days.
Right.
Did that go by quickly, or did it seem like 36 years?
Probably 36 years. But it passed rather fast. If you're doing something, if you just had to set, then that was another story. But I was usually on the move.
Did you lose very many friends on the island?
Yeah, too many.
This is a picture, and so when you left, let's talk about leaving Iwo Jima. How were you told you were leaving, and how many men left with you?
When we left, we were just ordered down to the beach to get on LCIs to go out to the APAs and climb up the cargo nets to get on. The company casualties was probably in the 75 to 80% of the original.
That's huge.
Of the field musics, my people that did the same type of work that I did, probably 65 to 70% casualties, because they knew we were carrying messages, and that's why I said I never traveled the same route twice.
So they targeted you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where was your brother during this time?
Which one?
Stan and, well, were they all in by now? They were all
No,
in?
Stan didn't come in. I don't know when he came in,
Okay.
but it was after. He's pretty much the tail end of the war. He didn't get in time enough to go overseas even.
Did you and your brothers know you were on Iwo?
Yeah.
And your mother?
The family knew it.
The whole family
They all knew
were
it.
there. Okay.
In fact, one of my letters home, they cut everything out of it except one or two lines. I had to write it all over again.
Because they censored it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, tell us about leaving Iwo.
Oh, it was kind of nostalgic in a way, but it was good. We walked down to the beach. We went off the beach that MacArthur said he would have landed on it because it was flat. But it's a good thing we didn't, because they had it zeroed in on there. They wasn't expecting us on the side of the island that we came in on. And it was landmined like you wouldn't believe. But we went off that way because they cleared the mines, and went down to the beach, and they brought the LCIs in close to the beach. We walked in up the ramps and into them, and then they backed off and took us out to the ship and climbed up the cargo nets to get back on board ship. Most of the fellows that come in on the island after the assault waves came off of the APAs on cargo, climbing down cargo nets to get into the boats that brought them into shore. And there was a few that were lost there because they lost their footing, or the waves changed, and when they let loose the cargo net, they went in between the ships. And I'm glad I went in the Amtrak.
Dangerous, really, just to
Yeah.
get on shore.
Yeah.
Or get back. And so when you left, how much of the fighting was left?
Not a great lot. There was a little bit, I understand, afterwards. There was some more Japanese tried to get through, but the Army was there and had taken over. And another funny instance you might think is when they came through the Air Force areas, the guys were throwing grenades and shooting and whatnot. And one of the Air Force boys said, "Would it make it any faster if I pulled this pin out for you?" Well, after you pull out the pin and let loose of the handle, you only got 3 seconds to get rid of it. So, it's a funny instance.
Mm-hmm. This is a picture of you on board the USS Storm King.
Yes.
That's the ship that
That's the
took you
ship
out.
that took me
that
back
took
to
you
Hawaii.
Back to Hawaii.
And that's not a wound there, that black spot. That must be a watermark or something on the film.
On the film, yeah.
We were
Because you were not wounded.
No, we were sitting there playing cards, and somebody walked by and snapped a picture of us. They're all the guys that were in my company. We just killing time with hearts and pinochle. I guess that was the main card games we played aboard ship.
How long were you in Hawaii?
You mean the last time or the first time or all
When you
together?
left Iwo and went back, where did you go from? You
We
went
went
to
back
Hawaii
to
and then
we went back to Hilo, back up to the Parker Ranch, Camuela, and back to our old tents. We went right back in there, and we started training to hit the home island. We were starting in fact, the day that the
to hit
ceasefire was.
to hit the Japanese
Right.
home island.
I'll tell you about the day that they surrendered officially. We were out on a live firing practice, and one of the big 81 millimeter mortar rounds fell short and killed 2 of our guys. I'm glad I wasn't the lieutenant to write about that. And as soon as the war was over, of course, we got ready to go in to do the occupation of Japan.
Let's talk about the ending of the war. Had you heard of this atomic bomb? Was there any
Yeah.
word out about that?
Yeah, we were glad to hear about that because. And I'm going to straighten up a misconception. It was horrible, the atomic bombs, but the B-29s and their firebombs killed more people than the 2 atom bombs. But the atom bombs were so cataclysmic, I guess. It just you can't imagine it, or at least I can't.
But you all were being prepared as most of the military from Europe were being prepared to go into Japan.
Yeah, I saw
for
where
a
we.
final large assault that they estimate millions of people would have
Yeah.
died in.
I probably wouldn't be here talking to you. On a 10-day detached duty, I was over in a city close to where we were to have landed, and I walked back into the mountains, and I'm glad we didn't have to land, because they had fields of fire that covered every inch of that beach. They had cut swaths through the trees and so forth, and it would have been, excuse my French, hell on earth. I'm glad we didn't have to. I'd much rather went in the way we did.
Tell us about going into occupational Japan. I mean, you fought the Japanese on Iwo Jima, saw, so much death and this sort of thing, and in the heart of really one of the most infamous battles of World War II. And then you went into occupational Japan to live and learn about these people. And what was that like?
It was a strange feeling. We went in at Sasebo, and the pilots come out to get us. We had a few Negro soldiers, and they wanted to know if they were our night fighters. So we didn't know, they were just regular Marines. And we landed on the docks. There wasn't anybody around except the police. And we marched up to where we were going to bivouac. Didn't see anybody. There's nobody on the streets except the policeman that more or less guided us to where we were to go. And my company ended up on a command post for radios, and we had some of the guys were 3 stories down underneath the ground for where they slept that night.
And where were you in Tokyo?
No, we were in. It was on Southern Island of Kyushu. Sasebo was a big naval base. That was on later we were sent on outpost duty. Some of the guys went into a Japanese barracks that was big enough to hold the whole battalion, the whole regiment could have been in there and had room left over. Some of the guys got to go over and see an old battle wagon that had been in the Russo-Japanese War. I didn't get that privilege, and We were there for several days. We got a few hours to go uptown, and we saw no one. The second time we went up, there were a few little kids out on the street, little tykes about hey, hi. They'd come up and want to know. Well, they'd say, Ohio, and we thought they were somebody ahead of us had been to Ohio. No, we're from Idaho or from Washington or whatever. We come to find out all they were doing saying hello. But the little tykes, little fellas, they wanted cigarettes and candy. They could speak that well. And it was that way for 3 or 4 days, and then pretty soon the young boys started showing up. Then old women. And eventually the populace showed up. But they'd been told that we was going to come in and kill and rape everyone. And they found out we weren't that way, and so they started coming back in. Then I was sent on outpost duty to Sauga City, which was a army base. And from there I went to the little town of Tosu, where we gathered in the arms they had and helped destroy artillery pieces. We gathered up all the arms that we could find, swords as well as rifles.
How did the Japanese treat you in general?
In general, they knew they were defeated, except those that come back from Korea. They hadn't been defeated. They were quite arrogant, but some of the boys on outpost duty where they came in and doing their arrogance, we had a corporal who was in charge, and he was like a commanding general, and he didn't take any guff from them. He'd give me trouble, he'd make them stand with their arms out like this at attention, and they start dropping, he'd up. So they learned.
But the women and children and the older people all adjusted pretty quick.
Yeah.
They were nice. I mean,
Right.
it wasn't a problem, and they weren't afraid of you. Or,
At Tosu, I got acquainted with a photographer there and his family. There's only about 3 or 4 of us that actually got into his home. On New Year's Day, this other guy and I that went on liberties together, got to go in and have New Year's Day with him and his family. We could go down and they'd invite us into the kitchen part, which had the little table with the heater down underneath, and Mama-san would send one of the kids out to get a bag of what we call tangerines, and we'd sit around there. And he had a sister who had been educated in the U.S. but had been back in Japan for quite a while, but she could speak enough English. We got by, we could talk. I got a lot of my pictures developed by him at no cost to me because we were become good friends.
how long were you in occupational Japan? How long were you there?
We landed in August, and I'm not sure the day I left, but somewhere around the last of May or 1st of June, the next approximately 9 months.
And then when you came back, you came to where?
San Diego.
San
We
Diego.
left Sasebo aboard the troop ship and landed at San Diego. There's another funny instance. I was sitting in line waiting to be processed and was reading a book, and some guy come up and says, "Hi, Agenbroad." I looked up. I said, "Hi." Looked back down. "Oh, that's Stan."
Your brother.
But he had changed considerably. When I left home, he was just a skinny kid, high school kid. And he'd put on some weight, and it was amazing, the transformation that was in him.
Boy, you must have really hugged each other.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yeah, that's all. You hadn't seen each other for what?
2.5 years.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. What a great reunion.
Yeah.
Did you leave the military at that point then? Did you?
Well, I was discharged.
Uh-huh.
My final discharge was July the 25th, but they sent us home before that.
This is a picture of you and Stan, both of you in your uniforms, obviously when you were both still in the military. You're on the left and Stan is on the right. And you're a Marine and he was a Navy man.
No, he was a Marine.
Marine, you're
He-
both Marines.
Marines.
Your older brother was Navy.
He,
Right. Yep.
he was in the sea bag disposal group.
That's right.
And I told him, if you run across my sea bag, to send it home to me intact. He did, except he took out the galvanized bucket. The one piece of GI equipment that he took out of my sea bag was the old GI bucket that we washed our clothes in. And why they kept that old galvanized bucket, I'll never know. But everything else, in fact, I got a full uniform when I was discharged, and there was another full uniform in the sea bag.
And this is you when you were discharged.
Yeah, that's after I got home.
There's your ruptured duck right here.
right?
When you came home, you came back to Nampa,
Yes.
and had you met anybody special, or were you married at that point?
Nope.
Okay. And what did you decide to do?
Well, I farmed for a while with Stan. And he got married, and the farmland that Dad and he had wasn't enough land for 3 families. He got married, and then my wife and I got married a year later. And I said, well, since I got a year and a half of college, I'll go back to university up at Moscow and get my degree up there. So we were married in 48, and we left shortly. We were married on August 22nd, 48. Left for the University of Idaho and lived up there the 4 years while I got my degree. Summertime, I worked for the state tax evaluation program during the summers, and she was in the VA for a while. She worked in the VA here in Boise before I met her. There's another funny instance. Frank Florian and I was running around together, and we went down to bowling alley. And lo and behold, she was there, and so was one of her friends. And Frank knew both of them because he'd gone to school with them, so he introduced us. And he took Jan home, and I took her girlfriend home. And I decided, hey, I want to know her a little better, so I called her up, dated her, and we've been together ever since.
Do you have children?
3, 2 boys and a girl.
And any grandchildren?
We had 3. One was killed in an auto accident when he was a freshman in college. We've got 2 great-grandchildren.
Wow.
One that's, I guess he'll be a junior next year, and the other will be a 8th grader.
This is a great picture of the brothers. You with your
That
your family.
That was down at my mother's yard while she was still alive.
And it goes chronologically. This is your oldest brother who was in the Navy.
That was Don, my oldest brother,
Don.
submariner.
He was a submariner, and then there's you in the
Yes.
Marines, and there's Stan in the Marines, and then your younger brother was
Larry.
a Seabee. That's a great picture.
The only one that got any recognition was Don got the Silver Star for his submarine duty. He never did tell us why. We just know he got the Silver Star.
You received accommodations, however, and I'd like to read these into the record if I may.
Okay.
You received, for your military efforts, the Honor Man PLT Platoon 140, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign with 1 star, World War II Victory Medal 1 star, Japanese Occupation Combat Action. Owen, could you tell us about these items that are on the table that you brought home from the war?
The beginning of a bracelet with the Marine Corps emblem on it, the aluminum off of it is off of a Japanese Zero plane that was wrecked on the island of Iwo Jima, and I thought it would make a lasting souvenir to put the emblem on it, and I think it's the dates on there also.
Did you make this yourself?
Yes.
And
I
so
made
you
it
took the
myself.
piece of, and it says 27th Marines, Iwo Jima, February 19th, through March 22nd, the
Right.
time that you were there. It says 5th Marine Division. That's pretty neat. That's a great piece. And the sword.
The sword was issued to us after we got to Japan for souvenir purposes, but some of the fellows on the island actually found swords, and a funny story goes with it. One of the fellows had one and found jewels in the hollow handle. I mean, they were several precious jewels, and he thought, well, I'll get some money out of an old CB. So he took it up to the old CB, and he says, how much will you give me for this samurai sword with all these jewels? And the old CB looked at him, he says, I don't want that, excuse my French, damn thing. All I want you to do is get this war over so I can build this road so I can go home. He didn't want a samurai. But the real old ones, the steel was so strong that the fellows tell me that they actually will cut the barrel of a rifle. If they swing it at you and hit the barrel of a rifle, they'll cut right through it. Nobody has been able to figure out how to do that since. It's a special art.
Owen, I would like to thank you so much for the honor of having you come to the Warhawk Air Museum and allowing us to preserve your military history. Our country is today what it is because of men like you who spent part of their life serving our country and defending our freedom. And we honor you for being a great American veteran. We thank you for your service to our country. And Jan, we thank you also for...
I didn't know him then.
It's okay.
Well, thank
for
you.
being married to such a wonderful man and having such a wonderful family. But thank you so much, sir, for coming here. We're very honored.
Celebrating our 60th anniversary on 22nd of August.
Good for you, you remembered. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't know whether you want to put it on there or not, but aboard the APA I got acquainted with 2 people I didn't know before. And we sat and talked with each other hours on end on board the APA. And I'm the only one of the 3 that came back.
Well, we're glad that you did and that you're here to tell this story.
You aren't near as glad as I am.
Thank you, sir. Is there anything that we've left out that you'd like to make sure is included in this?
Can't think of anything particularly.
May I ask you a question then?
Sure.
You grew up on a farm and, you know, had a rather rural experience life growing up as you did, and always wanted to be a Marine. You became a Marine, and then you ended up, without ever making the choice, in one of the most fierce battles of World War II, certainly one of the most historical battles of World War II. And you came out of that, you survived that, and eventually came home after spending time in peacetime Japan and helping settle that country down. And then had a successful career and a family and this sort of thing. You now have great-grandchildren. I'd like to know if you would, for a moment, think about how your experiences during World War II helped form the man you became. What lesson would you like to leave those great-grandchildren about those experiences and how an experience such as you went through leaves its mark and helps form the person become who they are?
Well, it took a country boy and made a man out of him. I wouldn't. You can't put a price on the experiences that we had there, the millions of dollars that you can't even express it that way. But I wouldn't give a nickel to do it again. But if I were young again and they called, I'd be there. I have a saying on the back of my pickup that I got, in which will kind of explain the thing about Marines. It says, "I'm not as lean, I'm not as meat, but I'm still a Marine." And that's one thing. I have 3 families. My family, from my brothers and sisters, our personal family, and I got the Marine Corps family. I go to reunions. I've been going to them for about 15 years now. Hopefully we'll go back to Washington, D.C. this fall, see some of the guys. It's quite an experience to go back and talk with them and be with them. It'd be like going back to see some of your ancestors you hadn't seen for a year or 2. They'd had reunions before that, but I didn't know about them until I saw where the 5th Division was having a reunion, so I called a number. Well, that's the Vietnam 5th Marine Division. I said, well, is there a World War II 5th Marine Division having a reunion anywhere? Give me just a second, I'll look and see. Brought up on the computer, yeah, they're having one in Seattle. And they give me the date, and even told me who was in charge of it, who was in my company. So that's got me started, and I think I've been to every one of them since then. And I can't tell you the year I started, but it was in the middle 90s, I think.
So would that be one of the lessons, the family that you that influenced you than probably the rest of your life, being a Marine.
Yes.
That would be one of the
Yes.
lessons you'd like for your grandkids
Yeah.
to know.
It
Mhm.
taught me to be
Mm.
compassionate with my fellow men.
Mm.
I graduated from the University of Idaho with a degree in agriculture. Worked for a seed company for 6 years, and during that time I also got my master's degree. And then I went back to the company and I went to work for Green Giant Company in Dayton, spent 30 years there. While I was there, I think my training in the Marine Corps helped me to become a Boy Scout leader.
Mm.
And I had 16 boys make Eagle.
Wow, that's quite a record. I'd say that you learned a lot in your Marine Corps years.
That's
and
what I said,
fighting on Iwo
it made a
Jima.
man out of me.
Made a man